Good day, everyone. Hello. Good morning for those of us in the US. Good afternoon for anybody anywhere else. Welcome to day 3 of Radio Week. This is a session entitled Cloud and Virtualization for Radio Operators, the Why and the How. And we have a great panel here. I'm going to ask everybody just to speak for maybe like 20 seconds to introduce themselves. Generally, I just wanted to let everybody know I'm thinking of this in like a general 2-part over the next hour. The first part is going to be kind of the cultural, the benefit, the risks, the cultural and real estate, basically the positives and negatives about hybrid workforce. And then secondly, the technology to support that. How do we do that? I always think of the need coming first. I think it's because of my growing up as a kid reading early science fiction, and remember the 3 rules of the robots, right, from Isaac Asimov, where robots can't kill, they're human and things like that. So I always think the technology should generally support a need and support us as human beings. So we'll start with the human aspect, and then we'll end with the technology aspect. So briefly, I'm Steve Schultes. I'm Chief Technology Officer with New York Public Radio. New York Public Radio is actually, it's coming up on its 100th anniversary next year. We have 8 signals in the New York City metropolitan area. We're the largest affiliate of National Public Radio in the United States. We're a podcaster. We deliver 1.5 petabytes of data per month for about 40 podcasts and 10 streams. We have a classical station and a news and talk station. Roz, do you want to go next? Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Roswell Clark is really my full name, but everyone calls me Roz. So I'm the Senior Director of Radio Engineering for Cox Media Group. We own 54 radio stations spread across mostly the Southeast, and a bit in the center and Northeast. So we not only have the radio division, but we also have TV and some other things. Part of my overall job responsibilities extends into the other divisions as far as business continuity planning, dealing with the unexpected and I guess you could say the expected disruptions to business. So technology obviously is a big player in that. Contingency plans and alternate capacities and those sorts of things. So also these days, as everyone is, we're kind of heavily into preparing for and defending against cyber and that sort of thing. So I think that component of the technology will play into our conversation perhaps this afternoon.
Very good. Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Alex Roman. I'm the CTO for MediaCo Holding. We're in New York City, actually within walking distance of Steve's offices. We have 2 radio stations, Hot 97 and 107.5 WBLS. They're both sort of iconic hip hop and R&B radio stations that have been in their format for a very long time. Hot 97 was essentially the first commercial hip hop station in the US. And we're also a very big digital operation. We have a huge video production operation, our own apps, a lot of digital presence. So I oversee the technology for everything for the workforce, everything for the radio broadcasting operation, and then also the digital media department. So glad to be here today.
Very good. Hi, neighbor. Udit has joined us. Udit, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi guys, I'm Udit Tyagi. I operate in the capacity of the Chief Digital Officer for Mirchi. Mirchi is an entertainment platform specific in India specifically. We have approximately 70 plus frequencies, FM frequencies in India and 5 countries abroad. I am running the whole digital ecosystem for Mirchi as a whole. I've been associated with the digital industry for more than 13 to 14 years now. And as a part of the objective, we started digitizing Mirchi as much as possible. We have a great video production team. At the same time, we have a publishing team. We're into podcasting, creating audio stories. We have our own apps, the Mirchi Plus app, and of course, the FM frequencies that you're aware of.
Wonderful, Mirchi. Thank you. And Philippe, last but not least, another East Coast seaboarder.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. My name is Philippe. Generally, I'm the CEO and president of RCS Worldwide. We are based in New York, and we are the largest manufacturer of automation software in the world. We have products that range from G Selector for programming the music, to Zeta and NextGen for doing the automation in the studio of a radio station, Aquara for the traffic. We have a new product called Audio Display, which takes care of displaying information and advertising in the dashboard of your car. We have a news system and many other little pieces of software. We basically sell our software in 120 countries, and I'm delighted to be part of that eminent panel of speakers. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Philippe, for joining us. And just a quick shout out to Red Tech for organizing this and the whole Radio Week. These are excellent discussions, and I hope we can all benefit from them in some way. So, all right, so let's jump into this a little bit. So, I mean, yeah, the elephant in the room, I think, is really, the pandemic left us, like a slap in the face with a hybrid workforce, and whether we were ready for it or not, for mobilization and hybrid work, mobility, we were basically thrown into it. You had to do it to survive. You had to support the business somehow to do that. For New York Public Radio, we just put together like Surface kits with microphones and Pelican cases. We made 30 of these. We shipped them out to our guests for a podcast creation, just to keep our podcast series going. But then also, and now we're basically, frankly, we're struggling to actually come back into the office, if you will. And there are people that I think we will not see again in person. And the people who are maybe more vulnerable health-wise. And then there's, of course, people who just, they've gotten used to kind of, the commute from the bedroom to the living room, like I am here today in my living room. So we're all kind of struggling with, how do we go forward? And I thought I would just kind of open that up a little bit. I know Alex and I have chatted about, the kind of the hardship of collaboration, depending on your station, depending on your broadcast. Is collaboration important? Can you do it through Zoom and through virtual apps, or what's missing from that? Alex, could I pick on you for a second, just to talk about a little bit what you've experienced?
Sure. I mean, we were in the very same situation as you, where we were thrown into this and we scrambled. I ordered every codec I could get my hands on and handed out every laptop that we had as fast as we could. And same situation where we are, where we want to sort of reorganize and get back into the office. And I mean, I feel like the radio industry is sort of a unique animal. We have a culture within our operations, and I feel like maintaining that and being deliberate about that is part of what makes the product cohesive. And that's one of the things that I feel we have to pay a lot of attention to. And we need to make sure, even if we do have people that are hybrid or remote employees, I think we have to be deliberate about making sure that we're all a team and a group and everyone is able to communicate and see each other, because I think you do hear it in the product. So yes, hybrid work is here to stay. Hybrid elements of broadcasting are here to stay. And there are advantages, there are pluses and minuses to it. We have the ability to have people that are on the other side of the country contributing content. A lot of people have tours that they go on or other events that they do. So we're able to bring in and support a good caliber of people with hybrid work. But what comes out of the speakers to the listener always matters. What sort of digital content we're producing always matters. And I think paying attention to where we end up is very, very important.
Yeah, very good. I have one personal story about we have on our news and information stations. It's all very local. It's all about New York City, right? And however, we also have cultural magazine shows that could be speaking about anything in the world or the country. And for the latter, I think the hybrid workforce has really been a great benefit for us, because we have a person live on air every day from the state of Georgia. What's that? 1,500 miles away. But And that's a contributor that prior to the pandemic, we could have never really entertained. We could have never solicited her to come to New York City, and because of just her lifestyle and her family and things like that. But now she's a great part of our business, and we see the benefit of that. Does anybody else have anything to contribute to that along those lines?
And I can give if I can, I'll just give you one quick response to what you just said. One of the things that radio was always famous for was, air staff that would move around the country. The famous line from the WKRP opening, moving from town to town, up and down the dial. And we kind of don't have to do that anymore. If there's someone that you really, really want to get as a contributor and they're on the other side of the country, you may have access to them now, whereas beforehand it would have been impossible to have them be part of your operation. So
Right.
Hey, Steve, I have a quick comment. So, I guess I might fall in the category of a case study here. I'm in my home office, but after this discussion, I need to get in my car and drive to the office because we have a meeting there with some, corporate management and, town hall sort of a thing, and some other reasons I need to be in my office. So this morning versus getting up early and fighting drive time traffic to get to my office and be there for this conversation, I just opted to have this conversation here and then drive into the office after drive time and be still a part of that. But so, and technically I could attend that meeting later today virtually, but the gap you have with the collaboration, the conversations, the relationship building, everything that goes into why we need to be together as people is a intangible that's lost. On the other hand, like you said, it's a mixed bag here. The flexibility and the ability to collaborate technically, that I would consider this a technical collaboration, but not a personal collaboration. The accidental conversations you'll have with someone because you happen to be physically in the same space, those things don't happen. When we're remote, I generally am scheduled to speak with certain groups of people and talk about certain topics. And there's a little bit of, water cooler talk, but not nearly what you'll have if you're in an office. My office happens to be down a hallway to the main conference room, and which also has the kitchen and all that sort of stuff. So there's quite a few people that'll just stop in. Hey, how you doing? And oh, by the way, we were just thinking about a whatever, fill in the blank. And you have all this stuff that just sort of organically happens that you cannot put that on a spreadsheet, and you really can't really clearly identify the gap that you're having by not physically being there.
Sure. And I notice, on the opposite end of the virtual side of it, I mean, we've all heard, and at least in the US, a lot of people are using the Zoom platform, and the term Zoom fatigue has really become a thing in the last years, because like you, Roz, if I just want to have like a 5-minute conversation with somebody, well, that's like at least a 15-minute and sometimes a half an hour Zoom call. And I just I wedge it into my Outlook calendar, and there it is. And then before you know it, I'm on my 8th Zoom call of the day, and it's just exhausting. Yeah.
I was about to say, to your point, Steve, Sally, you don't have, and to what Roz was saying, Sally, you don't have the improvisation of a conversation that you have around the water cooler, where sometimes the best idea come with hallway meetings that are improvised. With a Zoom, you have to schedule it, you have to have a topic, and it's rare that you just schedule a Zoom randomly to talk about stuff that you haven't planned. I just wanted to say on the remote work that at RCS we've been working on remote work for a long time, and the early manifestation of that was what we called at the time internet voice tracking. We just way before we were able to do that in browser and everything, people wanted to cut voice track from one location for another radio station that was situated on another location. And then we perfected that, and then we developed the browser-based aspect of operating a radio station for our automation system, for our music scheduling. And we found that when the pandemic arrived, these browser-based control of your automation system, of your voice tracking, went from being nice widget, nice gadget, to mission critical. And we got drenched with phone calls the first few weeks. what's that stuff, that selector to go, that Zeta to go? How does that work? Can you help me set it up? And can I have some information on this? And the calls peak through support, because it became really mission critical tool. So for a radio station, I think everybody now is working remotely as much as they can.
I think I'd like to add in here. See, the case is that what typically happens, hybrid has its own core set of advantages, but so does that in-person touch. If I'd like to put it in a sentence, the amount of width and the horizons that hybrid opens was very difficult in a non-hybrid kind of a setup. But the amount of focus that you can get on solving a problem through an in-person conversation is immeasurable. So for focus, it's always person to person, right? But for a wider horizon, for a wider distribution, hybrid is always a great idea. So again, if it's an individual contribution, probably hybrid is best. But when it comes to teamwork, probably nothing can beat in person. And as probably Steve and some of the others were also mentioning, 6 Zoom calls and probably 4 hours of the day are gone. The topics that you discussed in 6 Zoom calls could actually be closed in 1.5 hours in an in-person conversation at times, depending upon, again, the kind of work. So again, focus in person, but if you want to widen the horizons, probably hybrid.
Right. Well said, Udit. Yes. And then, then I don't know if anybody else is in this position, but from a benefit point of view, of course, like I know a few of us, including our company, we are on the verge of looking at new real estate, and now we're really struggling to put into numbers. Well, if we, like Alex said, hybrid work is here to stay. Well, if we package that into a footprint of, all right, so we're 350 employees. And what is the percentage then that is really going to be needed on the ground in a new rentable square feet for a new facility? And, can we, the money that we save from downsizing our footprint, I guess the question is, what's the benefit of that money, and can that offset at least some of the disadvantages of hybrid work? I don't know is anybody else struggling with, yes.
Yeah, that's an obvious, to me, it's an obvious benefit, right? So technology, cheaper, better, faster, that's what we do, right? And that technology keeps evolving, but this particular situation has definitely impacted the traditional requirement for bricks and mortar space. So we've gone through a couple of cases where, especially in high-rise type things or high rent areas, where if we have multiple floors, which is an inconvenience to begin with, for collaboration, that's another conversation. But really, when we can manage the people flow and maybe alternate people are coming in certain days, whatever, so you collapse that into one floor, you do gain actually the ability for some measure of collaboration by people being on the same floor, but also obviously you're losing a whole floor of Class A office space and the cost therein, and you can invest that in other ways to modernize your plant and make it even more effective for the customer, internal and external customer.
Right. Very good. Yeah. And one thing, especially, as far as like putting the money into the technology, one thing I'm seriously considering, I think we all have to, is basically very flexible acoustic space, right? You can, instead of building out, say, 31 control rooms and studios or whatever, maybe we have just a set core of them for like the daily grind on-air shows. But for production, maybe now we have like this swing space that's really acoustically very nice, but in 1 hour it can hold a conference meeting, in-person conference meeting, and with hybrid access. And then it could be from somebody's just personal workspace for an hour, and then there could be a podcast team that comes in and records or something like that. I see there's technology that's being developed for for very flexible space like this, where you can just basically, there might be some I/O equipment that's in there, some microphones or whatever, but basically everything is run on an iPad or something, and you can basically take advantage of that smaller footprint, but use it more flexibly.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just jump in, Alex. I see you definitely have some things to say here on that topic. But the other thing, then, the traditional format of studios with the thick walls, all other than you're talking about, is these days the video piece of it, and the sight lines, and how to get everything where the lighting, everything about it. Acoustics is obviously a thing radio's always been dealing with, but relatively new. Some of us have been fooling with it for a while, but when you modernize a space, you can then make it look good, not just for the people in the room, but for the people who are not in the room, customers, etc.
Very good. Yeah. Alex, did you want to jump in?
Sure. We're in sort of the same situation where we're going to do a footprint shrink in our place. Jumping back to the cultural aspect of it, one thing that I will say is that I actually feel like it's a negative to have sort of acres of empty offices. Certainly when you have a lot of your workforce that is on a hybrid schedule or permanent remote, you don't want the place to feel empty. You want every part of it to be lively. Otherwise, you don't want to have kind of a ghost town area of your floor. So I think there are actually reasons, aside from just cost, to want to shrink your footprint. As far as to how much, if you ask 3 architects, you'll get 3 different ratios as to how much space you have. Certainly, we are going to have to get into a world where space reuse is a thing. I feel like the concept, you brought up production studios, the concept of having one production person to one production studio is going to be something we have to change, especially if they're on a rotating schedule. I feel like scheduling systems are going to become very important. So where you might have like the panel on the outside of your conference room that shows the schedule based on Outlook room utilization, you're probably going to have to start doing that for operational spaces now as well, just to make sure that someone who's expecting to come in and record in a particular production room or is in on a particular day has that room blocked out so they have a place to go work. I'm looking at the concept of every room should be able to do everything. I agree that we're probably going to still maintain some dedicated on-air studios, but every other room should be able to be an audio production room, a video edit booth, an interview space, a video backdrop, and we need to design our facilities around that ability going forward. These rooms have to be able to be much more flexible to justify the real estate that we allocate to them going forward.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Alex, boy, you hit on a very I think an important thing that kind of goes unsaid, but the empty office space. I mean, we've all been into our office now, at least maybe in the U.S. here, and I'm one of them. I'm in a few days a week, but still at the busiest day, we only have about 40% of our staff in, and we are spread over about 4 different floors. So it just feels odd. And when I first started going in, when kind of the pandemic lifted a little bit, it felt like I was there on a holiday. We're all technicians. We all work overnights and we all work special holidays, to do invasive technology work. And that's what it felt like. There was nobody there and it just felt empty. And what was even odder is that when I go online to a Zoom call, then like that's where all the action was. All the action was virtual. But when I look out into the office and I walk around to the cooler, there's nobody there. And it was just such an unsettling feeling that was odd. And I'll tell one more story, then it will open it up a little bit. But just a few weeks ago, we were celebrating an achievement, and our entire technical team came in, and it was the first, and that's about 36 people, and it was the first time in 3 years that we'd all seen each other in person again. And these people are talking about it every day since then. It was just something you can't really put words on, but people felt it. And we had great conversations, very, very organic conversations, personal and professional and technology related. And it was just, people are still talking about it to this day. So, yeah, these things are incredible.
For what it's worth, in some of the customer we have that have embraced the virtual as much as possible for their studio operation, you'll have studios for clusters of stations in the same location. Even the studios can be repurposed with big screens on the walls and behind, and a studio can become instantly one brand or another. So depending on the time of the day, which are the hosts that are going to be in there, and sometimes the studio itself is completely empty because the 3, 4, 5 stations that are in the cluster are all operating remotely, and there's nobody in the studio. So even the crux of a radio station, the studio, is becoming a shared environment, and that's a big change from before, because that was the whole sacred place. This is the studio
Right.
for this station. This is that studio for that station, and so forth. Even that is becoming mixed and shared.
Right. And like you said, with the video screens, I mean, that can add to the video aspect that Roz was talking about too, because I think we're all, and some, like Roz said, some of us have been doing it longer than others, but we're all basically trying to find really the future audience, right? And I think visual is a big part of that. I know, Alex, you've got millions of subscribers on YouTube. And you've got a very vibrant audience on that, and the ratio of people watching streams versus people listening off air, that's got to be an interesting ratio at this point, and changing a bit.
Oh, absolutely. And the same thing with delayed listening, podcast reutilization of content. Again, I think also not only every room having to be flexible, all of our content has to be flexible to fit on all of our platforms. If we're going to do an interview, it's going to be on the radio and on video and on a podcast, and we want to reuse this content on as many of our distribution platforms as possible, as we are trying to find that new audience. Not everybody is on listening to our morning show from 6 to 10 a.m. They have their own schedules, and we want to make sure that we capture them when we can. And that's just a little bit of that. Actually, a lot of that shift has happened over the last couple of years, but it was a road we were going down anyway already. We already knew that this was where we needed to go as an organization. We needed to broaden our distribution and be available to people, and it's worked out really well for us. We go out, and the old radio remote is gone a lot of the time, and we go out and we instead do a live video stream. We actually send a crew out to go and do an event on live streaming video, whereas beforehand it might have been audio only. So
right.
And
Udit, I think you're living this every day. I've seen some of your content. I mean, you have, I think so much of your content is nonlinear. Do you have has the pandemic or has the hybrid workflow changed your strategy for developing nonlinear content?
So the pandemic and the hybrid model definitely changed our strategy. But I actually pretty much reflect Alex's thoughts that everything has to be flexible, and everything has to be multi-purpose, whether it is content or whether it's physical studios. You can't think of a studio for a station anymore. You can't think of a studio for a person anymore. The studio has to solve all purposes, right from catering to an audio show, to a podcast, to a station, to a video show, to every form in which a content could exist. And that's how we are doing it. Likewise, see, in the digital ecosystem, the main crux is the cost of production and then the consumption. You have to focus on reducing the cost of production, whether it's audio production or it's video production. So we're focusing on all of that holistically. And when you talk of cost of production, it is not just the human resources and the information required or the amount you spend on content, but it's also the brick and mortar involved, the real estate occupied, and the time occupied for it. So you have to look at it holistically as you move into the digital ecosystem. You are not competing with fixed set of 50 players, which you might compete with in a TV ecosystem or in a radio ecosystem. You're competing with a vlogger who's walking on the street, or a podcaster who's creating content from his own house. So you're competing with millions of competition at the same time. So the more nimble and agile you are, the better are your chances of success.
Very true. I'm thinking of all the TikTok stars with millions of followers, right? And they're just on their phone every day.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
like Mirchi Plus made it a point to work on social. For us, social is a very big thing. Nobody could think of Mirchi being the largest player in terms of interactions, as you call likes, comments, and shares on social. But Mirchi actually has more interactions than some of the top media houses in the country, and that's how we're working on.
That's incredible. Omar Esek from Red Tech has asked an interesting question, and I don't have the answer to this, so I'm going to put it out to the group. But he's asking, how challenging is hybrid working in markets where broadband is still a challenge? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I have one comment on that.
Yeah.
Most of the market in general, broadband, I wouldn't say is a challenge. But what happens is as you get the remote workers at their homes, and every single endpoint has its different capabilities, and where that really becomes a concern. And part of my job function is the business continuity planning. So, for instance, traditionally everyone would know that they had to operate from the main facility, which has redundant power, triple redundant ISP, whatever. It's a very hardened facility that we know we can confidently originate and distribute our content, at least out of that location. That's flipped over a bit where you have key either content contributors or key management types that are housed at home. A lot of the business has been distributed into homes and other areas where we don't have that hardening. They may or may not have alternate power. They're probably only going to have. They might have an ISP connection and then a hotspot maybe, but it makes the technology support different. You have to take that into consideration when you get into alternate modes of operation, because just real quick, and I'll stop, but the hybrid is a new normal, right? And so just like I am here, technically, most of the time my ISP is pretty solid. So far, I haven't dropped offline here, but I very well could. In 2 seconds, I could be gone from this conversation, and that is what it is.
Same
Whereas at the hardened facility, it would be much more resilient to that sort of thing. And so now we've extended our business risk out to these sorts of locations, and we have to think about that.
Very true. We realized early on. I mean, we've all. I think everyone on this call is somehow impacted by environmental challenges. New York City went under 6 feet of water in Hurricane Sandy, so early on in the pandemic, we shipped. At small UPSs, I don't know, 1 kVA or something, 1.2 kVA UPSs. Basically, we selected them by weight, like how much can somebody carry up their steps to their apartment, right? So everybody's got about an hour of runtime or so should they lose power. But if they lose power, will that keep up their ISP and things? It's really kind of struggling on a string there. But so even in New York City. There is very, very poor service out there that's just frankly illegal from a carrier's perspective.
I'll raise something else that a lot of residential ISPs do network upgrades and maintenance in the middle of the night. I have one cable modem provider that Sunday morning at 3 a.m, it's not unusual for the service to go down for an hour while they do some endpoint upgrade. And if we are relying on this to be accessible around the clock or on weekends, we have to think about that. There does have to be a plan B. I mean, the broadband hotspots, we have outstanding broadband service here, and everyone's deploying 5G and ultra wideband in this area. And that's been very, very resilient for us. It's almost better than a lot of the home ISPs. Sometimes it's just that someone is subscribing to the lowest tier of broadband at home. They have it, but it's at the low end, and someone's watching Netflix on the other side of the house while they're trying to do a radio show, and you end up with some conflict there. So every one of those we've had to solve on a case-by-case basis, and we truly found that it's variable. It's someone may have a great connection, someone may not. And there's typically only 2 broadband providers at most, maybe 3 to the average home in this area. So there's not a lot of choice if you have an issue.
Yeah. And I think in terms of the tools that you use for hybrid work, the technology today has to be browser-based, right? We want a thin client that is as economical as possible in the amount of bandwidth it requires, with as little work done locally by the CPU, but you push the work, the heavy work on the server side. so that it really just is a thin client. And that's why you want to make sure that the tools that your employees use, particularly in broadcasting to do the show, are browser-based thin clients that don't require a thick pipe that will choke or pose any other problems. And thanks God nowadays, that's something that's very, very common.
Right.
Yeah, I think I would like Philippe's thoughts on this, because what's happening is as the networks are improving and improving drastically, most of the processing is happening server side. In fact, for most of the electronics companies, specifically the phone operators, right, the future is probably reducing the amount of hardware being introduced in phone sets and focusing more on the network speeds, so that every processing happens server side, and on the client side there is very limited processing that's required, and that's where the world is moving. Apparently in this part of the world, the pandemic forced everyone to install a UPS, right, so that if there is a power failure they're connected. But again, at the same time, what helped was that mobile data is as cheap as it can be, specifically in South Asia, right? So unless it's live streaming for anything that is non-live, probably a lot of times for even live, 4G and 5G connections support it pretty well. But of course, you cannot ignore the chance of a ISP home dropout. So that does happen, and lives can be impacted. Live streams can be impacted at times.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Philippe, I was going to segue to you again because this topic of broadband infrastructure, and whether it's tenuous or whether it's resilient, I know you're building products for really operating a radio station completely in the cloud, and I just wondered, from your experience, are there some markets where you basically would say, that market's not ready quite for that yet, a little bit, or is it? Have you seen it basically resilient enough to support that technology?
It is rare that we have a bandwidth issue to run operation of a radio station at any of our customers. We operate in places that are very interesting. We operate in Africa, in places where bandwidth is a little complicated, but you do have 5G over there in many places already. And guess what? One 5G tower will solve the problems of many bandwidth issues that you're trying to solve by having a dedicated line or any other way, of old-fashioned way, I should say, of transmitting the data. And then if you have several providers, there are many tools that have two SIM that will allow you to operate on dual 5G connections. So the cloud operation really is safe from that point of view. And our tools, the RCS tools like Zeta Cloud and all the tools that we operate in the cloud, have several advantages. For the cloud of Zeta, for example, you can have devices that will cache your content at the foot of the transmitter, so that you have direct use of that content without it being transmitted real time and live over an internet connection. So we cache as much as possible. But in general, the connection itself to get the operation going is not anymore an issue that we can see. We also have offices in Kuala Lumpur with 180 employees. We have 220 employees in Mumbai. They're doing discovery for our Media Monitors branch, which is the monitoring aspect of the radio and TV in North America. Every one of those employees working from home in those regions, and we don't have any problem whatsoever for the connection. So it's actually time is on our side on this one. So hopefully we won't have to worry about that very soon. It's already just barely in the back of our mind.
In fact, I would like to certify what Philippe just said. We are actually using RCS cloud-based services for deferring stations to the time zone where the user is listening to. He was mentioning caching, right? So we're actually using it to make a user listen to a stream that is playing in Delhi, India at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m. East Coast time in New York, right? And it works like a charm. So it works pretty well. It's absolutely seamless, and cloud is the way ahead by all means.
Yeah. Philippe, back to you for a second. Could you just expound a little bit about the development of your cloud solution? It seems like it's the right place at the right time, right? But you must have been thinking of mobility and things like that even prior to the pandemic.
Yes, we were the first company to introduce a browser-based control of the automation system and of the music scheduling system, which were not a remote connection to your computer, but a real thin client, as we discussed earlier, a real thin client where the work is done server side, and the cloud was only a natural evolution of that work. It's really a way for a radio station to have a centralization of the content, centralization of the operation, and as safe as it can be. Our disaster recovery solution, for example, is the perfect example of something which is completely today modern, up to date, and economically viable. For a few bucks a month, we have a copy of your radio station. Everything, the content, the music, the spots, the jingles, the voice track, the commercials, everything gets copied in real time in the cloud. And should any problem occur on the ground, be it a fire in the studio, be it a cyber attack, anything that can cause your operation to go bad, you can flip a switch, a browser switch, and your operation will continue on a stream that you can redirect to your transmitter without any noticeable difference for the customers. So they hear your music, they hear your segue point. In fact, it's a complete Zeta system operating in the cloud, in a Linux environment, in containers, in Dockers. It's real cloud system. Not a SQL server in the cloud. It's a real cloud system, and that allows the continuity of the operation. So it's really something that nowadays, from a business point of view, I can give you the statistics, but about 3 out of 4 new Zeta customer takes the insurance of having the disaster recovery. Because that avoid having to have a second location, to have redundant this, redundant that. Because when you have a cyber attack, we had one customer who had a cyber attack. We had several customers who had cyber attacks. You know, the things like the crypto locker, for example, where they take your content hostage. You have to turn off all the computers in your organization so that you can do an antivirus on every single one of them. And still, you will probably not recover your assets anyway if you don't pay the ransom. So we can protect you against that. And I think that's part of the security that a media wants today.
Sure. And so many of us, including ourselves, I mean, like, after 9/11, 20 years ago, we all built out, kind of expensive brick and mortar disaster recovery studios and rack rooms and things like that. Best practices is basically to build it like, no closer than 90 miles from your environmental area. And actually, and we built out in Philadelphia, which is like, I don't know, a couple hundred miles. But that saved us in Hurricane Sandy 10 years ago. But now, that is an expense, and a significant expense. And then the Ethernet private lines that you're connecting to with big pipes and things like that. So that I do see cloud as the way to go from an economic and resiliency point of view, and to save a lot of bucks too.
Not to mention real estate, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, right. I see we had a question here that's interesting from Daniel Slentz. If anybody else can see it, I'll read it. Are you seeing more audio quality issues from remote sites? I guess, considering the hybrid work environment. And yeah, I'll be the first to raise my hand. And sure, it's that's why we went to considerable expense and effort to build out these mobile sites. Like even at the beginning of the pandemic, we went in with masks and gloves, and we, into our team's living rooms, and with some acoustic treatment and things. And we did our best that we could with good quality microphones and acoustic treatment and Comrexes and different codecs. But sure, there are, we've seen and heard issues, when bandwidth chokes and things like that. Has anybody else on this call, experienced that or found ways to work around that to keep the audio quality up?
Sure. I mean, we have had that, again, something we approach on a case-by-case basis. Some people, we find that their home setups sound great. Some people, we find that they have issues. But the biggest thing is listening with a critical ear. I would not say that we find poor audio quality acceptable. You may run into it and you may deal with it for a brief period of time, but every one of those is an issue that needs to be resolved, whether it's a microphone swap out. A lot of the time we simply find that people are just overdriving the inputs to codecs and don't know it. So we work with them. A lot of it is honestly just working with the talent, because now they're playing the role of engineer. Whereas beforehand we were down the hall, and if we heard something on the air, we just run into the studio and fix it.
Right.
Now they're 40 miles away, and we can't do that. So we do a lot of remote troubleshooting. We do offline testing with people and try and resolve it. But I do think that the actual quality of our product and the concept of broadcast quality is something that we can't let go. This is, again, something that differentiates us from the podcasts, from everything that's not what we do as a business. We're professional broadcasters, and we still need to make sure that our product reflects that.
Right. And Alex, just to jump in for a quick second on something you said, this point about supporting all this mobile workforce. We didn't talk about it yet, but even though we have a pretty filled out technical team, but the workload on this team really has gone up. I calculated somewhere between 25 and 40%. Because and not even including the initial go out with the truck and setting up the studios, but just the ongoing support. You have to get them on a Zoom call. You have to schedule it, and then you have to work with them. The help desk tickets are just taking longer to resolve because you just have to work with them in a remote situation. And frankly, there's a lot more equipment out there now. There's all these codecs. Everybody's got a laptop. And so just from a technology and management point of view, we have to make sure we advocate to keep our technical teams fat, if you will. We want to keep them well staffed so we can support all this extra work. It is truly extra work. And now's not the time to start thinning down our technical teams. I just wanted to throw that out there because we've just seen such a big uptick in support like that.
The customer that we see using remote voice tracking to that listener comment, yeah. I think the first thing our customer the radio station does when somebody wants to operate remotely is to get them a good microphone, because that you can't do without that. If it's not an SM7, send the USB version of that, but get them a good microphone, because it starts there. The guy can have big pipes. If you don't have a good microphone, it's going to sound like crap, no matter what you do after that.
Right. And not only a good microphone, but something that's actually, matched with the acoustic environment. A big, you could spend a lot of money on a diaphragm condenser microphone. And then you're going to get, all that, you're going to hear everything. And sometimes you don't want to hear everything. You don't want to hear the air conditioning rumble or the refrigerator rumble or something like that. Sometimes an SM7 or something, a good dynamic mic, directional mic is sometimes the best selection.
You made a very good point about support. Even just on the regular IT side, not on the broadcast side. Every time that we have an employee leave the organization or join the organization, we now have to ship or retrieve hardware from everyone. So I find that just the logistics of making sure we're keeping track of what's out in the field, who has what, who needs what, that itself is much, much harder than it used to be. We used to just stop by somebody's desk, and that's no longer the game.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, listen, we're coming up on 10 minutes here, and I just wanted to touch on, I guess, even just on the technical aspects. The technology has really shifted on the IT for broadcast side to to containers, Kubernetes, and things like that. I just wanted to kind of open it up to see if we can leave the audience with any kind of not tricks of the trade, but what's worked and what hasn't worked for us in the last few years of the pandemic to support hybrid work. Philippe's got a great cloud solution. We've all tried other techniques and things like that. Any kind of just tales from the road that have either worked or not worked for any of us.
Sure. So very early on, this was a happy coincidence. We were looking at swapping out our video digital asset management system sort of right before the pandemic happened. We had an on-premise asset management platform that was at the end of its useful life. And we decided it was time to move that to cloud. And with the amount of video content we generate, the storage of all this video in cloud-based resources is a big lift to get it there and to maintain it there. But we were very lucky to have made this decision at that point in time, because this system has become essential in running our digital operations, because now everybody is able to share footage, to contribute, to edit, and to work in workflow process from home. So that was something that we found was absolutely essential. We do have to think about that side of the business. It's not just radio automation platforms, it's production, it's digital production, it's promotions department scheduling. All of these platforms that we use need to migrate to the cloud versions of them. Unfortunately, a lot of that is out there and it's become the standard.
Mm-hmm. And somebody mentioned telephony on this call too. And Alex, I have a very similar timeline story like you did. Just I think in December 2019, we had just finished virtualizing our phone system, and we were damn lucky that we did it then, because how else would you screen calls from home and things like that. That just that was like the single largest virtualization project that we had taken on that year, and that really saved our live broadcast infrastructure throughout the pandemic and now, because now you can screen calls from home, you can take calls from home and everything, whereas with racks and racks of a PBX equipment, we would have been very, very hard pressed to do anything within the first 6 months of the pandemic.
Right. That's actually just a good general argument for staying on the edge of technology whenever you can. We can't predict the future. We don't know what's coming. Yeah. If we're not constantly modernizing our plants, we're just not going to have the systems in place and the resources to face things like this when they happen.
Sure.
I was going to mention something along the same lines that, with general disaster stuff, you get into a point where if you're preparing for that eventuality, it's an interesting conversation to convince people to invest in something that, what's the percentage of time you're actually going to do this? But when it happens, then all of a sudden, how come we didn't have even more of this? So it's always this sort of a thing. But going through a pandemic or any sort of a disruption to the business, I think hopefully the retention of the memory of how it was fortunate or unfortunate to have certain things in place drives the decisions as we start to evaluate what are the priorities of investment and technology, and when you do these significant investments, what do we get with that? So I'd point out to Philippe in his DR facet, if you're going to do an upgrade or change something, what about it do you get along with that? Whether even a transmitter or something like that. Nowadays, solid state transmitters being multi-frequency. If you can change the antenna, make it broadband. There's all sorts of things that you start to imagine. And then as we look over technology in general, the checkboxes, the security, the DR functionality, the remote flexibility, all of this stuff, is it remote controllable, like a console? Can you control it from a distance? All that stuff becomes, oh yeah, check that box. But that box may not have been there just a few short years ago. But now because of everything we know about cloud and computing and networks. Don't forget the resiliency of a network. Checking these boxes becomes just sort of commonplace, and you get more bang for your buck, if you will, when you're proposing an investment.
Right. And Roz, am I remembering right something you told me a while ago? Did you actually? I know you travel to your affiliate stations and you're doing, I think, tabletop exercises. Am I right that you actually tabletop like a pandemic?
Well, for years. Okay, so we were owned by a private company, Cox Enterprises, which we had a whole division that did nothing but security and BCP stuff. And so one of the tabletop exercises we always did was a potential worldwide pandemic, such as bird flu, that sort of thing. And it was always like, okay, well, this is something we'll run through the exercise just in case the whole world, supply chain, that sort of stuff. Well, after we transitioned to a new ownership group, because of me living in Florida and dealing with hurricanes all the time, it's like, well, this whole BCP thing, you can just handle that. And because, perceptually it seemed like it was a easy thing. 3 months in, we had a worldwide pandemic, which is the most difficult thing, because a hurricane, tornado, fire, anything that's very localized, depending on, everything I just said, and you've lived it with 9/11 and all that sort of stuff, the whole country wasn't impacted in a way, but, it depends on the event. But a worldwide pandemic, there's so many things that you have to think about, which we all know. And it's hard to tabletop all of those things and prepare enough in advance for all of that, because like any unexpected event, you always exceed your capacity locally to function. And that's where you reach out, beyond the impact zone. You just mentioned a little bit ago, you prepare an offsite facility 90 miles from the epicenter, if you will. Well, okay, the whole world is affected. So how can you build that in? So that sort of exercise, fortunately or not, we got through it, and a lot of lessons learned, and it's not just applicable to a worldwide pandemic, but definitely applicable and serves the purpose of all of the local and regional issues that we may encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we're coming up on time. Does anybody want to just take 30 seconds or so to, summarize what you're thinking on this topic, and we can round out that way?
I don't think that Roz just did a great job of summarizing it. I mean, it really is, we don't know which particular problem we're going to face going forward. We need to be ready for as many of them as we possibly can. And we need to constantly be looking at the flexibility and the advantages in every area of all of our systems, and be advocating for technology in our business that makes sense and gives us these opportunities and solve these problems for us. So it's
well said.
We need to do.
Yes. Yep. Philippe, do you want to mention anything?
Yeah, just one thing, one takeaway. Cloud is your friend, and you can have as much as you want or as little. You just want to dip your toe in the water, you can do that, and take a little bit to get to see how that friend behaves. Is it reliable? Is it easy to use? Does it work for you or not? And you can embrace it all at once, but you don't have to. You can just dip a toe in the water with cloud and see how it goes. It's one thing for sure, it's here to stay.
Yep.
So I'm of a very similar view. Cloud-based flexibility is the route ahead by all means, because cloud is the only thing which connects with every damn digital equipment that you have, even where you're sitting or where you're walking or anything. Any digital equipment in your life is now more or less being connected to the cloud one way or the other. So cloud-based flexibility is what will support you in reducing your costs, in supporting you through any pandemic, and in giving you as much flexibility as possible.
Very good. Well said. And that takes us right up to the hour. So I want to be prompt, and we all have other things to go. Our next Zoom call, if you will, I guess. So, but I want to thank every one of you here for a great, intriguing, and I think a very inventive conversation. And I want to thank Red Tech for hosting this and putting this together. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of Radio Week. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.